Ensign Sonia Gomez orders a hot chocolate. The Borg are not interested in political conquest, wealth, or power as we know it. And Q wants Worf to growl for him. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 16, entitled Q Who, written by Maurice Hurley and directed by Rob Bowman. This was May 6th, 1989. Where were you? We've got a very special guest today. This is incredibly exciting. We've got visual effects producer and supervisor, Mr. Dan Curry, joining us. How are you today, Dan?
Okay, biologically functioning.
It's going to be a fun one. So we've got so much to talk about, Dan. This is Cirroc's first watch through, first time seeing this episode. I haven't seen it in a long time, but you had a huge hand in this episode, specifically in designing the Borg. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the Borg creatures were designed, of course, by the great Michael Westmore, and but the art department and I worked on the Borg ship, the Borg cube, and we wanted something that was as unaerodynamic as possible. So it was like an early Lincoln, and nothing could be less aerodynamic than a cube. And
that's true.
And it shows that the Borg are entirely about form follows function. And I got to work out a lot of details like the Borg shields when they react to being shot with a phaser. And I had the idea that the shields would be little geometric shapes because the Borg are so efficient. The shape would only be as big as necessary to ward off that particular phaser. So you would see the shields appear as rectangles wherever the phaser would strike them. And I thought that was a good way to go. And I wanted to create, when we did the self-healing sequence where the Enterprise zaps it, and you see the whole
exterior of the ship.
Yeah, and you see it kind of heal back and come back from being all warped. And how we did that, I had a model maker, Kim Bailey, make a 4 foot by 4 foot shape of a close-up of the Borg exterior. And then we laid that flat on the floor using gravity as our friend so that things would melt straight down. And then I took 2 blowtorches on either side of the camera, which you couldn't see, and it melted the plastic. We photographed it at high speed and then played it backwards so it looked like the melted plastic kind of came back into shape.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, because back then, we had to be we as in people, not me, you had to be super creative in how you make these effects because we didn't have computer-generated effects the way that we know them now. So I've always wondered how you do these things, and you've got the best stories about it.
Yeah, and there's another moment where the Enterprise shoots a phaser and it blows off a chunk of the corner of the Borg ship. And what we did there is we made a plug, so we had the normal thing, and then we could pull that out and put in one that's all destroyed and melted, and then just shot it twice in the same position so that the explosion hid the transition from the healthy ship to the damaged ship. And the Borg ship was also built by Kim Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So you had an actual model ship of the Borg ship to begin with. How large was that?
3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet.
That's it. It felt immense. I would have guessed 6 by 6 by 6. Wow. So it was just incredibly detailed. Sorry, Cirroc.
Yeah. So was it also done with models? So the shot that's behind Ryan with the Enterprise kind of up against the Borg cube, was that model done with models as well? Enterprise model?
The Enterprise, we used the 4-footer that was built by the great late Greg Jean, one of the best model makers in history. And the trick with something like that is that the models are never in scale with one another. So our great motion control team at Image G we would use a lot of math to calculate if we have the camera move one way on say the Enterprise, then we would scale that move to work correctly with the Borg cube so that they would look the moves would be proper in the same context.
And how big was the ratio supposed to be? How much bigger was the cube supposed to be than the Enterprise in the original?
20 times bigger. So there's a lot of math involved to scale those moves.
This is nuts.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The stuff that you did, can we show some of the original matte paintings by Sid Dutton and Bill Taylor that you sent in for us? Check these out and you can tell us a bit about them. So this was conceptualizing. This is the art department with the concept. Here they are. So this is the interior of the Borg ship, right?
Yeah, this is the original matte painting by Sid Dutton, and it's on a piece of masonite that's about 10 feet by 10 feet, and the painting was done in oils by Sid. And then when he shot it, Bill Taylor, a brilliant camera person on their motion control rig, pushed in or pulled back to reveal how big the interior was. And if you look where your cursor is on the upper right there, that's the only real part of the set. That's what was actually constructed full size, where the actors performed, and everything else is an oil painting. But when we pulled back, one of the fun things is that Bill took legions of power toys, and as it would stop the camera during the move, build a little section of toys, pull back a little bit more, build more, add another layer of toys, and so that you felt like you were going through those pipes that had been behind the camera.
Yeah, you can actually see the away team right here. Data, looks like Data, Worf, and Riker.
That's it. And that also, this show has the first digital matte painting we ever did, maybe one of the first ever, where we used a paint box that was normally used for graphics work, and we needed a tight shot of Riker beaming in, and Riker, we didn't have an empty plate or a clean plate to dissolve from as Riker beamed in. So I took the shot of Riker and then hand painted on the paint box what the background would have been had he not been there.
Wow. Now we've got another one here for everybody listening in. This looks to be a section of the Borg cube that's damaged, right, Dan?
Yeah, that's the healing, the self-healing thing. And I got enough for 5 takes on it. If you look at the holes, there are 5 holes on it, and that's the one where we laid it flat on the floor, melted it with blow torches, and then ran it in reverse to show the self-healing, which we saw on the Enterprise main viewer.
Wow. So
yeah,
go ahead,
I wanted to ask you, Dan, the conversation initially about creating this and what the level of excitement was for having a whole new alien race to kind of develop and build a whole world around. What was the feeling like, and what were some of the early clues about what the Borg would be like for you?
Well, we of course had conversations with the writers and the producers and what they had in mind and what we were thinking of, and our reaction was that the Borg were among the scariest aliens that we've encountered for a number of reasons. First of all, for me, the reason they're scary is they are us. They're humanoid, and there are technology gone wrong, that were able to rebuild themselves. And I'm a partial Borg. I needed a hip replacement a few years ago, so I'm part Borg. And when Elon Musk has his way, we'll all have brain implants so we can tune into X without having to type.
without having a choice, maybe.
Yeah, and so I think that's why they're so scary, because they're what we could be if we made foolish decisions.
Yeah, I did get a sense of that when the initial Borg that came aboard the Enterprise was killed, and the next one appeared, and it made me feel like, oh, this is a kind of relentless, you can't just exterminate one. It's an infestation. And the determination also is one of the things that was kind of scary about how they move. Also the hive mind, but Dan, you're telling us so many things. It's pretty amazing. Why again did they want it to be a cube? You said the least aerodynamic, but why would they be the least aerodynamic?
Well, because it's a high volume interior with a limited surface area. Only a sphere would be more efficient. But a sphere would have some sense of being able to move through a fluid, while a cube is just flat, and it communicated to the audience that it only works in space. It can't go into an atmosphere because there's no air, no means of getting through, and that's why the surface is also so busy that as they would build onto it and they need some new technological element, they just stick it on the outside, and that's why it's busy. And the hive mind is very much like a termite colony where there's one queen, and the workers have no individuality, and they just sacrifice themselves with no emotion. It reminded me many years ago when I was in the Peace Corps. I built small dams and bridges in upcountry Thailand, and one year the monsoons were especially heavy, and there were floods all over. And I was taking a boat out to an island through this opaque, burnt sienna-looking water, and I noticed these mulches of about this big of floating rafts. It kind of looked like chop meat until I took a close look at them, and I realized they were ant colonies where the worker ants had all bitten each other and locked onto each other, and even though they drowned, they formed a raft to support the queen and specialized workers and select larvae in the middle of this raft. And I thought it was an amazing species survival technique.
That's unbelievable. I'm just picturing it. It just sounds incredible. No wonder it stuck with you for so long. Look, Dan, you sent us a couple more images in here that I'd love to show to everybody. This one is, I don't even know how to describe this one, but it's got two images of the interior of the Borg ship. What do we have here?
Okay, well, the one on the left, they're in scale with one another, is Sid Dutton's original 10-foot by 10-foot oil painting on board, and you can even see the C-stand just out of frame on the left. And and what happened is when we did the original painting, Sid knew that we were showing it on standard definition television, and so it was somewhat painterly when we up-resed it to 1920 by 1080 pixels as in high def. So we redid it, and one of the artists working with us, Sean Jackson, who's a brilliant CG artist, Sean redid it with great reverence to Sid's original work, and but we were able to use tools that were not available. So this is an all CG thing, and we were able to build in those little lightning things that stand behind the Borg alcoves. So we were able to put rows and rows of them in there, which we couldn't have done before, and made the section on the floor of the cube moving fluid rather than an oil painting. And there are some of the you can see in the foreground some of the model imitations of the legions of power models that Bill had physically constructed during the camera pullback. And of course, they're on a different plane. So you had this parallax happening as it pulled back. So it felt more truly three-dimensional. And in the original painting, by the way, Bill Taylor had cut out a hole in the masonite that it was painted on and rear projected the plate onto a piece of rear projection material, which is like white, kind of like a white gauzy material. And so every frame of the camera taking the painting was matched with the frame of the live action in that little window on the upper right there.
Wow. And lastly, here's just a smaller one. This looks like it's a close-up of Riker, Data.
Yeah, that's the part that's real.
Okay.
And so that was the only set we had.
Unbelievable. So the last piece of history that you sent us, by the way, which is to me the most fascinating, is the original storyboards for this episode, entitled Q Who, of course. And let's pull that up very quickly. For those of you just listening in, it says Star Trek The Next Generation Q Who, show number 142, Borg ship shots. And it's signed by Dan Curry, March 16th, 1989. This is an original. And can you just describe what we're seeing here a bit?
Yeah, I like to draw those three-dimensional arrows to show motion, so you can see how close the Borg ship comes from the distance, and then you can see on the right what scenes they're related to in the script, and it's fun. I maybe spend about 2 to 3 minutes per frame on the drawings. They're really fast, because I didn't have a lot of time. And I would just imagine how they would look together. And I had a toy die-cast metal model of the Enterprise on my desk, so I could use that to look at the Enterprise from different angles to design the shots.
That's so cool.
We've got one that says the Borg ship approaches the Enterprise and stops. We've got the face-off there between the two, so we can kind of see the size differences. It's more.
A note about the Borg tractor beam, which is mentioned in that shot, which we see now.
Yeah.
And the Borg, I had this idea one time. I met this guy who had a very professional laser system that he used for concerts. So I decided to take a Mitchell camera over to his garage. We put a piece of white foam core on the wall and just projected lasers onto it, but I'd bounce them through melted water bottles, melted plastic, a crunch beer can, whatever I thought of, and got these different shapes and built a library of these strange laser patterns. And one of the laser patterns became the Borg tractor beam and also the Enterprise tractor beam. And it had this interesting kinetic energy, and we could shape it into whatever perspective we needed. And so that's how the tractor beam was created.
Dan, on these pictures, on these drawings, you have the exterior of the Borg ship kind of looking like it ends up becoming. And when in your mind, you already had the kind of idea that it would have all of this very complicated looking, machinee of different things, really kind of grid-like, and I don't know what to call that, like a computer, like what is the visual of that surface of the Borg ship?
I was actually inspired by both Rick Sternbach's drawings of what he thought the Borg ship would look like, and then I was also inspired by in Southeast Asia, when they build tall buildings, they build the scaffolding out of bamboo, and it almost kind of looks like that. And looking at scene 41A, we built a special model for that, a 15-foot wide close-up in forced perspective of the surface of the Enterprise, and then we cut a hole in it, and you see the core of the Borg of the Enterprise with different decks being pulled out of the ship.
That was so cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And how we did that is I just put a wooden lever on it and just tipped it up with a lever by hand.
But you also, because I was curious as that section was being removed, about the different layers of, ship building material that would be exposed as it was being removed. And you did see some kinds of variation in the building material of the ship. What were some of those, the idea to kind of give that a three-dimensional layered look?
Yeah, the model that came up was maybe about 18 inches high, built at a slant, and we figured, one deck would be living quarters, another deck would be working space, and whatever we thought of. And had we had the technology, I would have had crewmen being floated out off into space.
Yeah. To everybody that's just listening in right now, wherever you find your audio podcast, do yourself a favor, make an exception today and come over to the Seventh Rule YouTube page so you can see these images, because this is kind of like one of those once in a lifetime opportunities of seeing. It feels like a piece of history. This is 34 years ago, 34 and a half years ago. And we're seeing these, and they took these storyboards and basically just translated them onto screen. I mean, that we recognize every shot here.
Exactly.
And we're scrolling through all of these. So everybody listening in, definitely do yourself a favor. And
they didn't deviate from those storyboards at all.
No.
The shots in the episode are exactly what is being depicted in those drawings. And Dan, you even drew the Star Trek Next Generation logo part on the header of that storyboard. Is that also hand done? Because it looks like you.
No, that wasn't hand done. But if you go back up a little bit to scene 46, that's the one where we had a plug, so we could just unplug the healthy part of the Borg cube and plug in the damaged part, and hid the transition with an explosion.
And for that, is that like a styrofoam or something that's done?
No, it's the same construction technique as the full model. It was just a replacement. It's like plugging in a replacement for a battery.
Okay.
There's another one of those patented Dan Curry streaking arrows to show movement. And this is showing that the arrows are showing that the Borg sphere or Borg cube is getting closer and bigger.
Yeah, and I also have a little simple kind of special effect thing that I want to ask you, but it's something I'm curious about. Sure. When Q flicks the ship into 2,000 light years away, or wherever the case is, the ship kind of goes whirling and spinning into the atmosphere, into space. What is the effect to accomplish that? Do you have it like hanging on a string and spinning it, or how are you able to accomplish that look?
Okay, well, the Enterprise 1701D, the one we used the most was the four-footer built by Greg, and it sat on a model mount. And if you go back, I want to talk about something on the previous thing. Okay, right there. So we had a gear head from a camera that could make the ship roll, pitch, and yaw, but the ship would stay in one place, and all illusion of movement back and forth, forward and backwards was accomplished by the camera moving on a track, which also had a tower, so the camera could go in and out, up and down, and side to side. And so using that and spinning the model on the gearhead, that created that illusion. And if you look at the illusion of the force field that's protecting the Enterprise, what that is I was looking for something else for Star Trek in a dry goods store, and I saw a cheerleader's pom-pom made out of mirrorized mylar, and I thought we can use that. So I took that over to Image G, and my colleague Gary Hutchell set a Mitchell camera on the floor and a mirror at a 45-degree angle, and I just shook the mylar pom-pom over the mirror, and it created this random sparkly stuff. And we just took that and wrapped it around a virtual sphere, which we then compressed so it looked like an M&M. And I actually have that pom-pom here.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a star.
It's
yeah.
That pom-pom is the force field that we see on the ship.
Yeah, that's the force field around the Enterprise.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And it's so funny because we go through life collecting junk, and then there's always people that are going to say, hey, you never use this thing, throw it away. But Dan, you are the one person in this world that can say, I am going to use this pom-pom from 1989. You watch. And you always put these things to such good use.
Well, we also used that pom-pom for an episode where we had these little energy creatures flying around, and they made kind of a tornado inside the Enterprise. And I did the same thing. I just did all the animation by hand by putting the pom-pom on a stick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dan, you're like the MacGyver of visual effects. You're like,
totally.
Give me a pom-pom, a beer can, some honey, and a paperclip.
And they're like, what's the beer for? And he's like, well, for me. The other stuff is for the show.
That's good.
We've also, what's this little Post-it note added? Here's a little piece of history. What does this mean?
Well, if I get information watching the cut, I might revise some stuff. So it's just a note on coming out of
Starfield.
Yeah, just a note on how to do the shot.
De-warp Starfield.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is such a cool piece of history, Dan. We've only got you for a few more minutes here, but there's still something very important to discuss. And that is, you were hired by Illuminate Hollywood. They were given a contract for season 2 to supervise the project. This is a rarity, right?
Yeah, it was apparently different companies were given different pieces of season 2, so it could all be accomplished within their schedule. And so Steve Weiner and Jim Hardy, who run Illuminate Hollywood, called me up and said, hey, would you like to do this? And I thought it was great. And it was unusual in that somebody who was from the visual effects department was really involved in the uprids.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to bring in some people from the show, Doug Drexler, David Takamura as coordinator, somebody I worked with on another project, Michael Davidson, and Mike Okuda and Denise Okuda worked with the studio and the studio honchos to kind of oversee all the shows from that season.
Have you seen the finished products now that everything's been remastered recently?
I've seen some of them, and some I thought were really great, and others there was one I thought the transporters were not up to snuff. When I would do a transporter, I would, in a paint box, hand airbrush like a white statue of the person being transported, and that way I could make the sparkles denser where the body is and give it a more three-dimensional look rather than looking at it through a flat silhouette. But I think everybody did a great job, and they tried really hard. And one of the things that Mike Okuda insisted upon was that the revised effects were true to the spirit of the original, so they didn't look too advanced for the period when the shows were shot.
Mm.
I think that they accomplished that, because I found myself asking myself, was that done at the time, or is that part of the redo? I had to ask myself a few times, but I'm glad that they kept a lot of the sequences that you made, like with the plastic melting, those shots, because that's part of the the beauty of the magic of filmmaking that you don't want to take away from and replace with the CGI. I think certain elements you do want to hold on to and kind of cherish, because those are the touches that you put into the making of this show.
Yeah, there were some shots that we couldn't. We had to go CGI. For example, Nagilum, the nothingness creature that appeared on the view screen. Well, we used when we did it, we had a Earl, I forget his last name, was the actor, and to get his face, I actually clamped his hair to a C-stand so he couldn't move his head back and forth. So we had kind of a steady shot, and.
That's a bit of a torturous move. Right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And
keep your head still.
and the tools we had then were a little different. So one of the crew at Illuminate Hollywood was able to come pretty close using CG to mimic that, and so we came as close as we could. But some things were just not doable. There's a scene in Where Silence Has Lease, where it was my homage to George Pal's War of the Worlds, where early in the movie, when the Martians come out of the ground and they zap an army captain, and there's a moment where you see a skeleton before he goes away, and that impressed me when I was a kid. And so I had to do my homage to that movie. And so I found an anatomically accurate skeleton about 2 feet tall, and I painted it up so it looked kind of grisly, and then lined that up with the actors. And then in animation, we burnt away the epithelial tissue of the people being zapped, and for a moment we saw that plastic skeleton, and then it all fizzled into nothingness.
When you say old TV or old movie skeletons, I think of Jason and the Argonauts. That imagery with the skeletons coming out of the ground is like forever etched in my mind. Brilliant. There was actually another thing I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned before we recorded, which was when you did the original motion control photography on film, there was CIS Hollywood that had the technology to do pin registered transfers from film to video. Can you?
Oh, that's right.
Can you tell us in English, because that sounds crazy to me? But can you tell us in English what does that allow you to do? What does that mean?
Okay. Well, at the time, most devices that would transfer film to video had rubber wheels, so there was a little slippage of one frame to the next, so they wouldn't be perfectly in register with one another. But CIS, Composite Image Systems in Hollywood, had something called a pin registered transfer system. And what they did is, instead of using the rubber wheels, they replaced them with movements from Mitchell cameras, which were very precise 35 millimeter motion picture cameras. And there are two kind of sprocket holes on the side of film. For normal prints, the holes are rectangular, and so there's a little slop there, but it makes it easier to run through a projector. But for pin registered, there's the perforations, the sprocket holes on film are shaped like old TVs. They have rounded sides, and they're very precise, and the pins on the on the transfer system fit perfectly in that. So each frame was in perfect alignment with the previous frame. So when you saw the Enterprise, for example, we would have shot it 7 times minimally to get that, because you needed one exposure called the beauty pass of the hull in its natural light. Then you need a silhouette to make a hole in the background to put the ship. That's called the matte pass. And then to get the glow on the warp drive on the nacelles, we would photograph those with a diffusion filter, which would spread the light and make it look like it was glowing. And same on the deflector shield. But then the windows and the running lights and other lights had to because they were very dim, they needed longer exposures. So motion control allowed us to photograph all those elements separately so that they would look correct when composited together. And
this is
when we
mind-blowing.
did the upres, that technology was no longer available. I think they used those machines as the foundation for coral reefs. And so once we did the transfer, each artist that was doing a composite had to hand fit each element so it was perfect. And so it took a lot more time. But so something gained, something lost.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's a lot of work for each shot to have to be filmed that many times over so that it can all blend together and have that effect.
Yeah, and sometimes we'd use the pom-pom as a hit on the Enterprise, but other times we'd cover the Enterprise with black aluminum foil, then spread out steel wool, which has a little bit of oil on it, and then by lighting the steel wool, it burns out from the lighting place, and it looks like a wave of fire emanating from an epicenter where the enemy phaser hit.
It's just amazing to hear how much work and how much incredible creativity went into every little thing that most of us take for granted when we're watching something. We're like, oh, that's the Borg, but we don't realize how much work was put into making these things that are so iconic and now immediately recognizable to us. But Dan, we really appreciate you joining us today. This was so much fun. We really hope you can join us again sometime soon to blow our minds again.
Well, and
thank you so much.
If any of your listeners are interested, I have a book out that was commissioned by CBS, and it talks about the evolution of visual effects technology going from the early days of TNG shooting on film, and ultimately on Enterprise, we did everything CG.
Yes. You can get this on Amazon.com or wherever you find your books online. I have this book myself. It's freaking amazing. It's unbelievable. It's got tons of art, tons and tons of pictures of art and sketches and concepts and designs. It's very big, it's very heavy, and it's very freaking cool. So definitely go get it on Amazon.com. It is called Star Trek: The Artistry of Dan Curry, The Effects, Weapons, and Wonders from TNG to Voyager. And it is unbelievable. With Ben Robinson, actually.
Right. And that picture is the only comic book cover I ever did.
That's so cool. Anyway, everybody definitely go check that out. Amazon.com, The Art of Dan Curry. Dan Curry, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody stick around. We've got a lot more coverage on this episode. I cannot wait to hear what Cirroc has to say about this particular one. We'll be right back. Up this episode to give a very special thanks to Thomas Webster, Sean TNG Mouch, and Barnett Sue for sponsoring this episode. Thank you so much, Thomas, Sean, and Barnett.
Thank you so much for your support, guys.
We appreciate y'all.
Prosper.
Yeah. Now back to the episode. Welcome back, everybody, to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week. Here are the trivioids of the week. Let's try that again. Ensign Sonia Gomez orders a hot chocolate. Captain Picard takes a stroll to Shuttlecraft 6. Q wants Worf to growl for him. The Federation is moving faster than expected, further than they should. At maximum warp in 2 years, 7 months, 3 days, 18 hours, the Enterprise would reach Starbase 185. The Borg have been developing for thousands of centuries or hundreds of millennia. The Borg are not interested in political conquest, wealth, or power as we know it. All right, my mind is blown. It does not work anymore because of Dan Curry and his incredible creativity. So I just want to ask this straight up. Cirroc, what did you think about this episode? I don't want to give anything away about how I felt about it.
Yeah. I thought this was a good episode. From the beginning when I saw that it was going to be a Rob Bowman, Maurice Hurley kind of combination. I figured, okay, this is going to be good because these are two people who understand the show and the characters as good as anybody out there. I did not expect the introduction of a whole new adversary for the Federation, and that's why I liked it, because I thought it started out kind of like, oh, this is going to be a Q episode, and it's going to be more of a joke than it was serious. And I enjoyed that it was more serious than it was a joke, because I think in the previous episodes I felt like it was a little too comical and over the top with the costuming and the playfulness and just the over the top performances.
The costuming for sure.
Yeah, just it was just a little bit too, oh, I dare you. Oh, I'll fall out. It was just too over the top for me. And when I saw Q again, I thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be a game and a joke and nothing serious. And because Q does make a joke and a game out of everything, but I thought this one was a good use of Q's skill set and abilities. It was a more serious topic, and he was actually preparing the Federation and, in this case, the crew of the Enterprise for what the, likely adversary is going to be, I think, going forward. So I like that fact that they used Q to push the story along as opposed to make it a one-off about Q doing some funny, like, let me trap you in a maze type thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I was, the big thing for me is that this is it. This is where we meet the Borg for the first time. This is where it all comes from. All the Borg episodes, the movies with the Borg, Picard with the Borg, Lower Decks with the Borg, Voyager with tons of Borg stuff, Deep Space Nine starts with the Borg. I mean, this is like the biggest, introduction that we've had. And I can't help but feel, and I felt this way for a little while, and watching this, how just mysterious and ominous and beautifully delivered a lot of the things were like. For example, the absence of scoring in certain points was noticeable, because when it was tense and it was mysterious and it was confusing and it was scary, there was no music. And I thought that was such a great choice to not have any music there. But all that to say that a lot of people feel that the Borg have since been neutered, for lack of a better word. They've been diluted because we've seen so much of them. And then, then the, 7 of 9 was a Borg and then became a human. And then we see them again in this thing and that thing and whatever, that now they're less scary. Now, Dr. Agnes Jurati became a good Borg, and it's definitely very interesting, and it definitely fleshes out the Borg much, much more. But if you compare that to how it was when it first started, they were originally introduced as a very scary adversary. And I said that on purpose to rhyme. I didn't, but anyway, I don't know. Did you feel that way? Did this feel different in tone with the Borg, than what we see later on? Or do you think it all still kind of fit?
Yeah, I haven't been exposed to too much Borg other than the Picard reviews that we've done with Dr. Girardi playing the Borg Queen, and I've seen a little bit of that. I haven't seen the feature film with the Borg Queen, the main one. I think that I may have seen it actually.
First Contact. It's my favorite of the Star Trek movie. I mean, the Borg are freaking amazing. It's just, I think it's just that we've seen so much of them. I don't know where that line was, but now that I've seen so much of them, I feel like it loses a little bit of this mystique.
I mean, yeah, if you see a lot of something, obviously you know much more about it, and it's not as scary to you after a while. But I do think the entrance was great for them because of the mystery that kind of preceded it. There was the mystery of Q talking them up. There was the mystery of Guinan saying that there's a history there that she was not 100% witness to, but had knowledge of.
Her race got wiped out by the Borg. Yeah.
Right. So there was all of that. Then there was the whole appearance of them on board the ship where, Geordi sees one just standing there, right? I like the fact that it wasn't done with too much fighting or gunplay. I like the whole, that they were there to do reconnaissance and not really becoming a threat in the beginning, kind of leaving the crew to figure out what is the best course of action to deal with this Borg that's downloading their computer profile or whatever it was doing. But yeah, so I think the mystery was there. The idea of the hive mind is another great idea for them. I felt like, Nick's man up. As soon as that first one went down, the next one came up, and I think removed his eye piece or some kind of memory chip from the first one. So yeah, there was that. Like, who are these people? How do they function? How do they communicate? How are they able to infiltrate so quickly? How is their technology so much more advanced than ours? Obviously their speed was able to able to go faster in that cube than we are at warp 9, whatever we were at, right? So there were a lot of ominous factors there. I thought it was a great episode. My favorite so far with John Delancey, because it feels like this is what Q really wants anyways. He just wants you to kiss his ass and say how great he is. I think it's almost like is that Q in a nutshell? Your sound is out, but
sorry. I was saying, yeah, that is Q in the nutshell. First name Pho. And he just wants to have his ass kissed. He wants you to revere him and be like, wow, you are so smart and amazing and intelligent and funny and interesting and right about everything. And he'll just be like, oh, Picard or whatever. But, there was just so much to this episode that it was cool to see, Guinan get, some interesting storyline, not just kind of listening in or whatever, but being a major part of it. It was cool to see O'Brien, who they never give a regular line to. He didn't say when he got an order, he didn't say understood. He said, you got it, or don't mention it, or right, he always has a little bit of a flair in there. And just this whole episode, I noticed there was no Pulaski in here. But this whole episode just felt tense. And I agree with you that when Q shows up, you think, okay, it's going to be a silly one. But when we meet the Borg, it wasn't. It was very serious. And when you were talking about the Borg showing up and the guy gets beamed over, gets shot, the next one, that's two things. One, that is the hive mind just saying, we don't care if we sacrifice one guy. We don't care if we sacrifice 100. It's just all for the betterment of, the group, the hive. But the other thing is incredible superiority. they're not worried about the Enterprise. They're just curious. They're like, oh, is this something that we can mine for technology? They don't think of them as a threat or competition or a rival. Kind of like when we walk by some ants. If the ants are like, hey, how come this guy's not fighting us? We're like, because you're freaking ants. We're not worried about you. You know, at least I'm not. Sometimes I am.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. I thought there was good use of Guinan. The whole her sensing something I thought was really good. You know, she played on her intuition and, you know, her skill set. The fact that she had it to the story I thought was good. Her calling over to the bridge to ask if something was wrong. Nice little extra scene there that I enjoyed. I saw the multi-level chessboard in this episode, which is, I don't know if it's the first appearance of it, but I definitely noticed it for the first time.
With different pieces, too. So I was really curious about that thing, but I don't. And hopefully someone in the free-for-all will know.
Yeah. Also, like the idea that they had this ensign Sonia Gomez, because it did give us a little bit of Latin spice to this crew. And I think it's in line with what I saw as far as the memo that was circulating, that they wanted to increase the presence of people from the Latin community. So that was one kind of pleasant thing. Of course, the whole hot chocolate scene made me laugh because I was just thinking, oh God, if there's one person you don't want to spill hot chocolate on, it's the captain. Because he says, LaForge says, "Sorry, sir, it's my fault," and Picard's like, "Indeed." It's like, yes, it is your fault.
Yep, no argument for me, he says. Really cool. You notice they keep introducing characters. Like they introduced Dr. Solar. They introduced Mendon, the Benzite, this guy's brother. Now they're introducing, they introduced Pulaski. Now they introduced Guinan. Some people are sticking like Guinan, like O'Brien. Others are not, like Solar and a couple others. Now they've introduced Sonia Gomez. I mean, clearly she had no real role in this episode. So they only had her in this episode as an introduction so that we get to know this new character. So this was her big, everybody welcome Ensign Sonia Gomez of Engineering. And looking forward to many more episodes with her. Maybe we'll see. Keep an eye out and see if we could see her again in the next episode. Here's the question, though, because we're just about out of time. Who gets the home run of the episode?
I'm going to say the home run goes to Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan. I like the way she delivered her lines. I like the scenes that she had. She had a very believable tone in her voice, and there's an authenticity in her performance that I think is just almost unmatched by anybody. She is really, really good at making you care about what she says.
Absolutely. Home run of the episode for me is the writer's room, specifically Maurice Hurley, for giving us a new type of villain. We've had plenty of villains that come in and say, I'm gonna kill you. This is totally different. This is a new way of thinking. And it forced everybody that's watching this for the first time to reevaluate what could possibly be out there. They're not all just going to look like humans, except that Borg baby was coincidentally a freaking human. And also the director, Rob Bowman, for really putting the music in the right places, taking it out in the right places, delivering it well. I thought it was a very well-directed episode to my untuned eye, an unprofessional eye. However, people that do have professional eyes are as follows. People we would love to give a very special thanks to, and their names are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan.
Arucan.
Our pal Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann on a post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, who also worked on the remastering of this glorious episode, I believe, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, our good pal Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manosfi, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason, the outrageous Okun. Everybody, by the way, you can listen to this wherever you find podcasts, anytime, anywhere. Just look up The Seventh Rule. Also, we review all new Star Trek episodes as well. Lower Decks, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Prodigy, Picard, on The Seventh Rule 2. So wherever you find your podcast, just do a search for The Seventh Rule 2, the number 2, and you will find us. Please download the episodes, listen, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We really appreciate it. Give this video a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notification. That's all the chores we have for you this week. Stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule. This is the free-for-all, so get ready for some fun. Look who's here. Melissa Longo is here with Sonia Gomez chilling behind her. We've got Eve England out in Wales that everybody's dying to know what she thought of this episode because she hasn't seen any Next Generation before. Jason, the outrageous Okun, is going to tell us how much he loves this episode. Dr. Susan V. Gruner is going to do the same. Chris McGee is going to teach us something, probably make a joke or two. Mai is live in Tokyo. She's got a great, well, I was going to say great guy behind her, but also impression. Matt Boardman is here with probably something he worked on himself in this episode. Allyson Leach-Heid has her favorite baseball team shirt, the Shikar Salots. Greg K. Wickstrom has a shirt that he got at the introvertedrepublic.com, just like Melissa's shirt that she got at the introvertedrepublic.com. You can get yours there. And lastly, Carrie Schwent, assimilation means
you'll always have friends.
All right, we'll cut that out. Did we have any non-appearance mentions this week? I don't think so. I think we got a non-appearance non-mention for Pulaski, right?
Yeah, non-mention, yeah.
All right, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm going to say this was probably like an 8.1. Probably 8.1.
Does anybody else have a guess that doesn't?
I think this is really high because everyone's going to love this episode, I think.
How high do you think? But you have to translate it to inches.
Maybe 8.99, maybe.
Wow.
I think it's going to be super high because I think people going back will score it highly, I think.
Sue's super high right now. Cool shirt, Sue. You guys, Eve England nailed it. It's an 8.9.
Nice.
Wow.
That's not what I think, but I'm sure that's what everyone else thinks.
Right, it's just a guess. Sue, you didn't know it was an 8.9?
Oh, no.
No.
I thought that's why you reacted so strongly, because Eve got it on the button.
No, I can't believe it got that high a rating. No.
More on that in a moment. Melissa Longo, can you please get us on the right track here and tell us what you thought about this episode?
I think the track's going to be all over the place.
I think it was a solid episode. I think it was a good introduction to the Borg, and making them seem pretty scary, because I was pretty scared of them. And especially the part where they were repairing the ship by itself, that was freaking creepy. Freaking creepy. Although I have questions about the nursery.
Thank you.
Questions about the Borg nursery. But and I love that we get to see Guinan again, because yay, Guinan! She's always been one of my favorite characters in all of Star Trek. So anytime we get to see her is a plus in my book. And this opinion is going to probably tick some people off, but
All right.
Q makes my butt twitch. Q
In a good way or a
is-
bad way?
Yeah.
bad way.
Thank
He
you.
is an absolute jerk turd nugget. Jerk turd nugget. He's here calling Picard all of these names: arrogant, petulant,
Yeah.
all of these things, which he himself embodies and demonstrated very well in this episode. He calls losing 18 people a bloody nose. I don't think the friends and family of those 18 people would think of the loss of their life as a bloody nose, nor would I think that those 18 people would think of themselves as a bloody nose either. So yeah, he really, although John Delancey, he's so good. He is so good. There are so moments in this episode that he just nails it. He nails it, and he makes me dislike Q even more, which is great. And yeah, but overall, I think it was a pretty good episode. Oh, was the first away team that beamed down to the Borg the same as the last away team that was on the Borg ship in Picard? And if so, nice job, Terry Matalas and company, because that's a deep cut. That's a deep
very
cut.
good. Very good.
That's awesome.
And we also had Sonia Gomez, I believe, in season 2, episode 10 of Star Trek Lower Decks, which was also a nice story arc for her.
Yeah.
Eve England is out in Wales. She's going to tell us why she thinks that most people gave it an 8.9, but that she disagrees.
Yeah, I mean, knowing what I do now about the Borg, I can see how this must have been pretty epic at the time. Those scenes on the Borg ship were just eerie, they were unsettling. And I just thought the combination of like the music and then those weird panels that they had in the nursery were definitely giving me sort of alien vibes again, which I think I've mentioned a couple of times, actually, seasons 1 and 2 so far. But I thought that was just really good. And as Melissa said, I thought the scenes with Guinan and 10 Forward were also incredibly well done. They just added sort of a greater level of intrigue and depth to the direction of the episode as a whole. And I just thought that the music, particularly in those scenes and also with all of that mood lighting in the bar, just really did sort of elevate that sort of tension that we kind of had right from the start. But having said that, what I didn't generally enjoy the episode overall. I didn't feel that the plot was particularly tight. It lacked the character interaction that we've kind of got used to over the last couple of episodes. And it wouldn't surprise any of you to know that I just thought this was another episode where I thought the portrayal of the Picard character was just terrible. I thought he came across so badly. I mean, to quote the new Picard, the sheer fucking hubris of Picard throughout this episode was just so frustrating. And I totally get that, Q is awful in the character himself. But this episode basically started that chain reaction that led to all of the future Borg encounters that we have going forward that ultimately led to Wolf 359. So you can totally see why Sisko was totally pissed off with Picard because of this episode, because Picard could have just totally prevented all of this from happening. I mean, he had the gall to blame Q for those deaths, but he himself could have put an end to that. Q kept saying, I can stop this, I can help you. And Picard's arrogance was just, no, we can do this ourselves, we're good enough. So I just thought, he treated Q with impunity when in fact he should have been treating this petulant god with the respect that that's such a person actually, needs, because we all know what Q is like, and Picard should have known better. And to me, I think what really bothered me was the fact that he just totally ignored Guinan, who was the most knowledgeable person in that room about this scenario, and he just completely dismissed her. And she seemed to have these ninja powers that we didn't get to see. Hopefully we'll get to see more of that, because that was pretty cool. But generally, in summary, to me, I just think it really did need Pulaski in this episode, because I just don't think Pulaski would have let Picard and Riker just peacock around, blundering into this situation. And I could totally see that she might have punched Q and just resolved the whole situation.
Yep. I'm sure that would have handled it just fine.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah. I have so many things to say, but we'll have to save that to the things left unsaid segment afterwards. Jason, the outrageous Okun, is pissed about what Eve just said. What did you think about this episode, Jason?
Well, I'm always pissed. That's my big secret. Overall, when something like this comes up, and obviously I've seen this before, and it is certainly one of the better episodes of the second season, perhaps the second best episode if you consider Measure of a Man being the best, and perhaps one of the more sort of memorable episodes of the entire series. Whether you like it or not, it's certainly a memorable one. And there's always this feeling as if I watch it carefully enough, is it going to stand up? Is it something that I'm going to be disappointed in if I really look at it very carefully? And at some level, the shine may have come off a little bit, but I still enjoy it tremendously. I think it's probably the fastest paced episode we've seen so far. And I can tell you, I read the script and it just went in a flash. I mean, if I were just looking at the script, this would have been something that jumped right off the page. And it moved along pretty swiftly, which is kind of unusual, I think, for Next Gen, all throughout the run. I mean, if you look at The Measure of a Man, it's a wonderful episode, but nobody would call it fast-paced. I mean, it's probably one of the talkiest ones you'll ever see. This certainly is not a talker, and perhaps that's not bad at all. You don't necessarily have to have a lot of conversation. It does, tell us or show us something. And to some degree, the fact that Rob Bowman got, to do something with it, was amazing as well, because I think he milked them, a lot out of whatever little money they had. I mean, there's certainly little things here and there, and I'll talk about them, things left unsaid. I mean, there are quite a lot of nitpicks, sort of par for the second season of Next Gen. But overall, I think the way it was shot, and I think the pattern that I noticed, even though you have the same DP for Rob Bowman's episodes, the lighting tends to be a little bit more intricate. Certainly in 10 Forward, they had good lighting in the observation lounge. In one scene, Q was lit only on one side. That's not very usual for Next Gen at all. Some of these walk and talks, he films them in a very unusual way. There's a walk and talk with Geordi and Sonia, and Rob Bowman filmed them sort of coming right along with them, like you're walking with them, right next to them instead of in front of them. I don't know how many walk and talks were filmed like that. So I mean, that to me is a little bit unusual. At the very beginning, in the teaser, when Picard sort of goes to the turbo lift with his soiled uniform, he's filmed from below with a wide-angle lens as the camera follows him. I mean, this is unusual. You don't really see that at all. So the look was great, and Ron Jones's score, I think it's a little eerie, and the Borg theme continues in the best of both worlds. I mean, that kind of carries through. So it does give you that kind of an impression. You can debate whether Picard behaves in a certain way and whatnot. But if you behave sort of in this perfect way, you wouldn't have an episode. I mean, you have to have something here to have a story, and it does in a way, it does teach us that sometimes we are arrogant. Sometimes we think we know more than we do, and I think it applies a lot, perhaps to the first world cultures. We're thinking, we're sort of this and the other thing. We can do anything, but all of a sudden, when you're thrown into a situation where things aren't exactly what you're used to, you find out. You don't know what you don't know. And that is sort of the message of the episode for me. Sometimes we need a kick in the butt. And I understand, 18 people dead. I mean, first of all, this is a TV show. Second of all, from the standpoint of Q, if you look at, at what kind of a life form or character he is, a human life to him is virtually nothing. So this is par for the course. and reacting in front of him and throwing tantrums would not have looked good anyway. You grieve in your own way, and that's what I guess the scene with Geordi and Sonia is about. Put that aside. We'll grieve. So there's certainly an explanation to be had, but overall, I think it's certainly an enjoyable episode, a very fast hour, both on the page and on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Jason, the outrageous Okun. Dr. Susan V. Gruner, what's up? What did you think of this one? I'm afraid to ask.
I am not a fan of Q. I think they could have taken him out of this episode. I just it has nothing to do with John Delancey or anything. I just don't like I don't get the whole Q thing. I would have liked this episode better had they killed off Sonia Gomez. I thought it would have meant more because she was starting to get friendly with Jordan. I thought maybe I would have had some feelings at all if they killed her off. The Borg babies freak me out. Do we ever see that ever again? Borg babies?
Lower Decks.
It's assimilated people.
Yeah, that's right.
I've forgotten. We do. I don't remember if. Oh
It
yeah,
was fun in Lower Decks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh well. Okay.
I think there's some in Voyager too.
Oh, yeah.
I just have forgotten. But the first, when I opened up with Sonia spilling her hot chocolate on Picard and everything, I thought that was. I just didn't get the whole point of that. What do you call that? A subplot or whatever? It wasn't even. It just didn't fit to me. Again, it would have fit better if she was one of the people that I think that was killed in the end. And again, I love what Eve said about the petulant god. I'm thinking if anybody really had that kind of power, wouldn't you do stuff for good? Why wouldn't you? Why would you pick on a little spaceship full of humans? It just doesn't make sense to me that Q would be obsessed with something like that. I hate to say obsessed with ants because I happen to like ants and all, but ants, of course, like Jason said, humans are nothing to him. But I don't understand if it was a god type character, which I guess Q is sort of. Why wouldn't have more respect for all life, not just humans? And I did love the set and the Borg cube and everything. It changes over time, and I had forgotten initially that it was different. And did you guys see or remember the part where after the one Borg was dead, the other guy pulled like his eye socket out and all that? I didn't remember that. I completely forgot. But they don't do that in the later episodes, right? Unless I have forgotten that too.
Yeah,
He
the
took
weird
a
thing
off his chest, and
the weird thing was that he took it off, those pieces off, but then they both
then he
transported
beamed
back.
them up. Yeah,
So he
right.
didn't need to take those off because they were both
Right.
going back anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusing things here.
Mhm.
I was a little disjointed. I didn't hate it though. It was entertaining.
So you're saying there's a chance. Thanks very much,
I would have given it
Dr.
like a 7.2, something
That's
like that.
okay. Dr. Susan V. Gruner, thank you very much. Chris McGee agreed with the pulling of the items back thing. What do you think of this episode, Chris? Oh, you're muted, bud. Or we can't hear you yet. Well, we'll have that figured out. But when we mentioned those pieces, he pointed. He said, "Yep, that's my point." And now we can't hear it. Can we hear you yet? Okay. Well, we'll come back to you then. Mai is live in Tokyo. What's up, Mai? What do you think of this one?
Just a couple of comments. This was a Wild West episode, not too much to say on it. I will say that hot chocolate in the future is significantly cooler than hot chocolate in the present, because if he spilled all that hot chocolate, he would have been flinching like a mofo. That was crazy. I don't know what was up with that. On the handling of the superior force of the Borg, yeah, I got to agree with Eve on that one. Sheer fucking hubris, both Picard and Riker. As a Taoist, Sun Tzu took a more humanistic approach to the whole thing of war and conflict. For him, the greatest victory wasn't found in overcoming your opponent through strength or cleverness or force of will. It was more in avoiding the battle altogether. In other words, get the hell out of there when you can. I mean, anybody that's ever been in a relationship knows this, right? So anyway, so I think, let me see if I can get this right. I think in closing, what I'd like to do is just say that it was absolutely thrilling to note that 6 years earlier, Guinan's defensive stance was used as part of a very popular music video. And I leave you with this.
Hey.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
And similar to the Ferengi dance. FYI. Thanks very much, Mai, live in Tokyo. Carrie Schwent is here. What's up, Carrie? What do you got for us today?
Oh, I enjoy this episode. As we all know, I love Q. Him and Wesley are my number 1 and number 2. So I love seeing him. I love watching him just mess with Picard because he is clearly in love with Picard and just can't help himself. I'm sure there's much fan fiction out there involving the two of them. He's just fun, and hearing him ask Worf to growl for him just makes me grin every time I watch that episode. There is a image that I shared with Ryan. The scene in the shuttlecraft. I remembered seeing a meme of the two of them. Mm-hmm. Comparing a certain image from it to the border between Idaho and Montana. So and it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't really unsee it.
So look, it's Idaho and Montana. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's it, right? It's got Montana leaning in and nibbling on Idaho's ear, just like Q is sneaking into Picard's personal space.
Stay out of my safe space, Q. Ew.
Yeah. Bitter.
I hope he has good breath.
Here's hoping he took a mint before filming that scene. Yeah, the music in it was excellently eerie. I love the Borg. I love the shape of the Borg cube. I love all the angles and all the piping and whatnot. I borrowed this image from a friend in the Star Trek The Cruise group who goes by Bliss Image. She let me use her artwork as my background today, so I promised I'd shout her out. But yeah, the Borg cube is just so cool looking. I would really love to see either a limited series or a movie of the origins of the Borg. I think that would, every time I watch a Borg episode, I think of that, and I think it would be really, really cool. I would also love a separate movie or limited series on just the Q continuum. It doesn't have to have, my Q in it necessarily, but just more about the continuum itself and maybe the other members of the Q, which I think honestly would be very, very cool. I love Sonia. I wish we could have gotten her more. As a founding member of the fictional land of Klutzlandia, she is very welcome to move to my country. All Klutzes are welcome. And yeah, she is just so darn adorable, and I love her. I have also talked to machines the way she does, saying please, with the Android Auto in my car. It asks if I want to respond to a message. I say no, thank you, just because you never know. Yeah. When AI decides to rise up against us, if we're nice to them, maybe they'll be nice to us. So I decided to take that funny moment as my inspiration for the poetry for the week. Working with machines can often be cold. We rely on them to do as they're told. But why not be nice so that they will think twice and not rise up to try to seize control? Something to think about. You never know what Alexa's plotting when you're not asking her to do stuff.
It's scary. Thanks very much, Carrie. That meme is the gift that keeps on giving. Great stuff. Gregory K. Wickstrom, what's up, man? How are you? What do you think of this one?
Good. You know what? I think I really like this one. So I'd watched this series only once before, and I watched this one about 3 months ago. And the Borg were actually scary. Well, like, they're a force to be reckoned with, To me, they're like existential dread personified. Like, when the cube is chasing them, it's just a cube, like a tidal wave almost. You're just like watching it come towards you. For that, I think it's really good. I just rewatched it yesterday. Well, it didn't hit me the same, but that's understandable. Let's see. You're not going to like me for this. I have a crazy theory. I think Q is humanity's evolution. Like, their prime directive could be, like, he was teaching them a lesson in this one, right? He was teaching Picard a lesson. The Borg were already on the neutral zone, right? Because they said that there were, like, their cities were scooped up or something out, just like they saw when they got there, wherever they were. So I think the Borg were inevitable. Like, he didn't introduce them. He just introduced them earlier. Let's see. I have some notes here. But yeah, Picard learns at the end of this episode, like, it says, we needed a kick in our complacency to prepare us for what lies ahead, right? And then he checkmates Guinan, it looks like. They're playing like a 3D chess. I have no idea how that chessboard works, by the way. But yeah. It's I don't know if that was scripted or if that was just like blocked by the director, but it was great. Right after he says that, he like learns a lesson and then he moves the chess piece. But yeah, that was great.
He took an aggressive move right there to back it up. Thanks very much, Greg K. Wickstrom. Great stuff. Allyson Leach-Heid is here. What's up, Allyson? What did you think of this episode? You loved it, probably.
I like the episode and I love bits of it. You get a nice amount of Geordi being a good, commanding officer to Sonia, which I really liked. He took the new ensign under his wing and like, this is how we work on this ship. And the importance of not overworking yourself. You need to take time off. Love that. When I was reading Memory Alpha, there's this cool thing that the way this episode was shown in Germany is different than anywhere else. The scene in 10 Forward where Guinan is like sensing Q, but there's no real words and you see Geordi and Sonia in the background talking, you can actually hear them talking in the German version of it. And he's giving her actual advice so that when she says, thanks for the advice, like 2 scenes later, it actually makes sense. So I thought that was interesting that for some reason it's different in Germany in how they dubbed it, I guess, or put the sound on. And I really liked how we got the juxtaposition of how Troy senses things and Guinan senses things and how they each handle like, oh no, I need to do something, and how they handle it. Guinan's like testing the waters, like, I'm not sure if I should say anything. And then of course, Troy's just bull in a china shop, like, no, we're doing something right now. I thought that was great. Sad we only got to see Guinan's office the one time. It was nice she had one for having one. She is running the bar, so she's got to do some sort of work, not just hanging out with people. Like that too. And we got 2 Emmy nominations for this, or Emmy wins for this episode, for sound mixing, and it's in here somewhere else, sound editing. So I like it. It's entertaining. It goes by quick. Not my favorite episode, but it's entertaining.
One of them. Thanks very much, Allyson Leach-Heid. Chris McGee, what's up? Can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay?
Yep, beautifully,
all
perfectly.
Right.
What do you think of this one?
Microphone problems. I took way too many notes, but don't worry, I will be brief. As Carrie had mentioned, I'm with Ensign Gomez here. I prefer to say please and thank you to my smart speakers. Because after all, I want to be on the AI's good side when the inevitable uprising begins. I noticed one moment in 10 Forward when Q claims that the Enterprise crew were exonerated of the charges of the crimes of humanity in that very first episode, just kind of a throwaway line. Well, later, this subject is brought up again, and Q says something a little bit contradictory to that. So keep an eye out for that when it happens. As was already mentioned, Data points out that the great rips in the surface that seem as if the technology had just been scooped up from the surface. That was definitely a callback to the Neutral Zone, the finale in the first season. It was a great callback there. I like that. But now let's address the big things here. There's several recurring elements in this episode. Obviously, there's the Borg, but I'll get to that in a second. There's an antagonistic past between Guinan and Q, and we get a little bit more, just a touch more about her race and its background. I think this may be the first time that we hear that she's a very long-lived race. I think Wesley at one point said that she's very old, but we don't know. We didn't know just how old until now, I think. I think now the Borg in this episode were kind of not fully fleshed out. I believe they were originally meant to be, and I have no basis. I don't have any kind of evidence to call on this, but it seems like they were intended to be kind of their own race, their own species. And they just add other species technology to theirs. No mention of biology because there's no mention of assimilation in this episode, no catchphrase, resistance is futile, things like that. And of course, the nursery, which until Lower Decks and maybe Voyager was never brought up again. So, I think it's a better plot point to have the assimilation. That was a great change they made. But in this episode, it's never mentioned at all. I'll save the rest for things left unsaid, but I will leave a lot of quotes in this episode. So I'll pick one that's a little bit unusual that I remember. And that is, "Yes, Ensign, it's all over me."
Not touching that one, but Matt Boardman will. What is up,
No
Matt
way. I'm not
Boardman?
going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
What did you think of this episode? And you were part of remastering this, right?
Yeah, I absolutely love this episode. It's that introduction to the Borg, and it's fun to go back and watch this episode knowing where we end up, especially at the end of Picard season 3. But just to see the changes and how the Borg have evolved over the seasons of Trek and everything versus what we see here. I love Ron Jones' score. It's absolutely amazing. He does such a great job in these first 3-4 seasons with the music. I don't know. Can I share my screen? I want to show you guys something if that's possible.
Yep. 1 second, please. There you go.
Okay. Let's see here.
Focus.
Let me share this. Okay, there we go. All right. So I don't know if you guys can see this.
Mm-hmm.
But, we talked about that matte painting, and I know you guys met with Dan earlier, and he probably talked a little bit about this. But one of the things that I got to do is I got to help a good buddy of mine, a great artist by the name of Sean Jackson, who got to redo this particular scene here. Let's see if it'll play. Oh, is it not going to play for me? All right, I'll just scrub along here so you can see it. Hopefully that's showing on your end.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had to rebuild this matte painting. Here you can see this is the original matte painting here. And we had to rebuild it because
you can even see the C stands over all the way on the left on that original.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. So we had to rebuild this digitally because it was one of those situations that, unfortunately, when they went back to the footage and they scanned it in, because it was standard definition at the time that it was made, they got away with a lot of it, and unfortunately, it just did not hold up in HD. You saw brush strokes; things are very muddied. It just was not very clear. So we rebuilt this, and these are all 3D geometry and stuff like that. But an interesting thing about this is is that, Dan wanted to add some Borg moving around here, and all of these alcoves that you see here and these Borg came from the Star Trek Experience 4D ride, the Borg encounter. So that was actually, so we reused elements from that were used in making that ride. So anyway, it was a fun episode to work on. It was fun to work with Dan and kind of listen to the stuff they talked about. I was very fascinated by the fact that, Riker, Worf, and Data, when they beamed over to the Borg cube and they're on that little, it was just a little tiny set piece that they were on, and then everything got filled out, rotoscoping and everything like that. But anyway, I love this episode. I love that we get the Borg, because they're one of my favorite antagonists of Star Trek, and I'm grateful we got this episode, because without it we wouldn't have the Borg.
Mm-hmm. Very good stuff. Thank you so much, Matt, for that and for your contributions to what we get to see anytime we want. Really appreciate you. Jake's final take. Cirroc, any final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I wanted to give a little shout out to the costume guys that did this Borg outfit, because that's something that they expand upon as time goes on, and it's something that does stand out as being unusual. And I've seen a lot of people cosplay as Borg over the years, and it is a look that stylistically has held up as being ominous and also an integration of technology and human, and it has accomplished that cyborg effect that we kind of have in our head. So shout out to Bob Blackman or whoever it was that designed this original Borg costume. Also thought it was ahead of its time to be talking about integrating AI into the human brain, something that we see as being currently developed as we speak, with all of the big tech companies, trying to find ways to do that kind of integration. So we're definitely heading in the direction of manifesting some of these things into reality. Well, whether it turns out to be good or bad, that's left to be, seen, really. There was a couple of moments there that I felt if I had a chance to read the script, I would have made a rewrite on, because it felt insensitive to me for Q to be making such negative references towards the Black characters on that bridge. One was towards Worf when he calls the microbrain, and the other was towards Guinan when he calls them this creature. And both of those things jumped out, and it just felt offensive to me. If he spread it out towards everybody, I guess I would have not noticed it as much, but it just seemed like it was directed at Black characters. So it bothered me. And in a rewrite, I would have made some kind of adjustment to that in the language or who I'm directing the language toward. The microbrain was something that was previously kind of established, so I kind of let that slide a little bit. But then I thought the Guinan attack was a little bit over the top to me. I was laughing when Ensign Gomez was rubbing hot chocolate on your chest. Like, if you spill some hot liquid on somebody, you don't rub it in further. That's what a perv does when he's trying to cop an extra feel on you. That's not what you do. You actually have a towel or something. You got to soak it up. You can't just spread it around.
I think she was trying to wax off. That's all.
Yeah, that was just, come on. That's just basic logic. And then my last thing I'm going to say is the scene in which Guinan was sensing something at 10 forward and feeling something was off. Obviously, we later, we know that it was Picard's not on the ship anymore, or maybe the presence of Q. I'm not sure which one she's feeling, but it was a nice moment that there was no real music or anything, and just basically her using her facial expressions, no dialogue, to carry about a 30-second span of that sequence. And it's a lot to do just on facial expressions, just on keeping us, this curiosity. And I thought that Whoopi Goldberg did a fantastic job of just not only her facial expressions in the acting, but also in the tone in her voice when she was describing, when she called to the bridge and she was, saying there's something wrong. There was a tone in that voice that I thought was exceptional. It showed perfect level of concern and worry, but also like trepidation about, this is not something I really want to be doing. I love the note she hit with that. And also in the conference room when she was recalling those past trauma that she had experienced or had knowledge of, I thought she did an excellent job in her performance in that as well. Yes, and ironically, there's an arrogance between both Q and Picard, which is hilarious because they both have a certain level of that collides in this episode. And yeah, it could have been over a lot easier if he had just been willing to ask more questions and be more curious of what Q was really trying to say. Like Q actually said, "Hey, take me seriously. Listen to me. I have something to say." And I think at the very least, you would entertain that before you let him, which he's capable of, throw you into any kind of situation. I would first try to see where is he trying to get at first, and probe as much probing as I could do as a captain, knowing that he had those kind of powers. But overall, I think Maurice Hurley and whoever else it was that was part of the creation of the Borg, I think they did a great job of giving us a new adversary, much like Ira did with the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion, just giving us a new something to hold on to, a new adversary, a new thing to be curious about in the space that they're flying around. And so I think for those reasons, they really hit the target on this episode and accomplished the goal of giving us some curiosity about what kind of adventures lay forward, for this crew. So on that and note, I would say they really accomplished a lot. And I will also agree that I wish they could have used Ensign Gomez for more than what I saw. It felt just a bumbling kind of thing, but there could have been moments in which either some trust was put into her to do something that was heroic or something to that effect. So I could have, seen her character used in a better way. But all in all, I think it was a great episode, and starting to really take form as a show that's having all of these great space adventures for me. So I really look forward to watching these episodes, even though I have a lot of critique of them. I'm still looking forward to watching them and seeing how they unfold, and I'm kind of sold on the universe that they've built and created thus far.
That's it for us, everybody, if you can believe that. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa Longo, Eve England, Matt Boardman, my live in Tokyo, Dr. Susan B. Gruner, Jason Okun, Allyson Leach-Heid, Gregory K. Wickstrom, Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Bear, and the Dark Lord, Chris McGee. Thank you all for joining us. For Cirroc Lofton, myself, Melissa Longo, and Aaron Eisenberg, thank you all very much for joining us. We've got a little bit more to talk about. If you are a patron, you can join us too in our final segment called Things Left Unsaid. If you are not a patron, see you next week on the Seventh Rule.